all human beings are naturally risk averse. This is a bias which is deeply seated in all of us. I'm sure you're well read on people like Tversky and etc. who talk about this all the time. For your viewers, there are numerous psychological experiments that have shown that most people, to the point of irrationality, fear loss more than they are excited at the prospect of an equivalent gain. So, for example, if you have $100 in your wallet, you're more worried about the idea of losing the $100 that you have now than you would be excited by the prospect of gaining $100 that I could potentially offer you. This comes out whenever you get black belt versus black belt confrontations or any kind of similar skill level. Whenever you get similar skill levels, the chances of defeat get very, very high. Interestingly, if you're a white belt and you're going against a black belt, you'll take risks. Why? Because there's no shame in losing to a black belt when you're a white belt. So you'll play more lightheartedly and you'll have a more fun role. But when you have very similar skill levels, you're going to come back to what? The techniques that are most likely to get you a win. That number of techniques is usually pretty small. And if you're always battling with the same tough opponents every day, where if you make even a single error, it will cost you that match in sparring, and you don't like losing, you're going to stay with a very small set of moves. You might get slightly better at their execution over time, but you as an individual will not grow. Growth, as it does in organic life forms, comes from small beginnings and builds over time. You can't take an untested, untried move and get it on a world champion black belt. It's going to get crushed. So it's not ready for that. It's like a lion cub being thrown out into the Serengeti plains. The lion cub is just too small and too ineffective. It's a lion, but it's a cub. And it's not until it grows into maturity that it can be a lion that can dominate the Serengeti plains. That's why I always encourage my students to play with a variety of belt types and spend the majority of their time with lesser belts for development purposes. When you're getting closer to a competition, you obviously want to change that. You want to be getting more a competitive sense of hard work. But you must learn to divide up your training cycles into non-competition cycles where you're presumably working with people who are slightly lower in level than yourself, and in some cases quite a bit lower than yourself. And then competition cycles where you're working with people much closer to your own skill level.
The big theme of this video is very simple. When it comes to progress in Jiu-Jitsu, there is no free lunch. You will have to work hard for all of your progress. Nonetheless, there are some important and impressive shortcuts that can get you to your goals much faster than most people believe is possible. My career has been associated with maximizing progress in minimum time for all of my athletes. For example, when I switched from primarily coaching mixed martial arts athletes to grappling athletes, I began with only 4 competitive athletes: Gary Tonin, Eddie Cummings, Gordon, and Nicky Ryan. All of them, except for Gary Tonin, began their study as blue or white belts. All were unknown and inexperienced at the time they began training. Within a very short time frame, they had attained a level of success that shocked the grappling world. In those early days, we used EBI's submission-only grappling competition as the primary form of high-level competition to exhibit that progress. Gary Tonin won EBI 5 times, Gordon Ryan 4 times, and Eddie Cummings twice. All 3 achieved the milestone of winning all 4 matches by submission within regulation time, a feat no other athletes have ever been able to replicate. Nicky Ryan was too young to enter EBI, but at the age of only 15, he defeated a former EBI champion in another event to clearly show he was at that level despite his age and inexperience. An even more dramatic example occurred after the breakup of the squad and the relocation to Texas. We lost 80% of our competitive athletes, Gordon Ryan had a debilitating stomach illness that forced him into semi-retirement and made competition and training more or less impossible for him. I began training a new team of mostly random walk-ins who had a dream and not much more. In less than a year, that new team qualified more athletes for ADCC World Championships and won more medals than any other team by a considerable margin. And perhaps most surprising, won more medals than the previous team at its peak at the previous World Championships. Again, the lesson here is clear. There's no free lunch in Jiu-Jitsu. All these athletes worked extremely hard, but they made a staggering amount of progress in a remarkably short time, in a way which shocked the world. It is my sincere belief that you too can make an amazing amount of progress that will shock your friends and teammates. This video is about how you can do this in one of the most important and valuable aspects of the sport, your ability, how you as a student are going to radically increase your submission rate in the least possible time. I've had many outstanding students over the years who did exactly that, and I'm hoping that you'll become one of them. The first question we have to ask is, how are you, as a practicing Jiu-Jitsu athlete, going to achieve this? What kind of general mindset will you take? What I'm going to advocate is this. There are 4 key factors in your development and the increase of your submission rate in the least possible time. The first one is going to be choice. Which submission holds will you choose? Let's be clear about something. Not all the submission holds in Jiu-Jitsu are created equal. There are radical differences in the success rate of the various submission holds. You go from very high percentage submission holds to very low percentage submission holds. And that's a simple brute truth that the number of submission holds which reliably submit opponents at the highest levels of Jiu-Jitsu are relatively small. Bear in mind that I only teach around 6 major family submissions, around 6 major submission holds in the entire sport of Jiu-Jitsu. I do, of course, teach others, but 90% of what I teach in daily training is based around 6 major forms of submission hold. Of course, there's a not very large number of variations within those 6, but it's really a relatively small number that I teach. You can learn an enormous number of submission holds, or you could focus on a relatively small number and become extremely adept at that small number. I will always advocate being an expert in a small number over being mediocre at a large number. Choosing the right submission holds is a big part of how successful you're going to be with submissions. Choose the most high percentage ones. When you focus on the most high percentage, you're increasing the chance that you will be able to submit a wide array of opponents at all skill levels, all body types, etc., etc. So your first big thing is choice. Make sure you go with high percentage submissions. And of course, soon we'll be revealing exactly which are the most high percentage submission holds in the sport. The second big thing is the idea of immersion. You want to immerse yourself in the study of a few skills. Just as with the learning of language, if you just sit around and read a foreign language book for a few minutes a day, it's going to take you years and years before you become adept in that foreign language. But if you get thrown into a foreign country and you have to do literally every single task every single day for every waking minute of every day in a foreign language, you will learn pretty damn quickly. Immersing yourself in a skill is the fastest way to learn. It's important, therefore, that once you've made your choice, you must immerse yourself in that skill. You must, as it were, take on an apprenticeship with that skill where you study it night and day to the best of your ability. You look at great athletes who use it particularly well. You look at the history of the move. You look at how it relates to your body type, your personality, and you immerse yourself in that skill the same way you would with, say, language learning, for example, or any other skill. The deeper you go into it, the faster you learn. So first, you got to make the right choice. Second, you got to immerse yourself in that skill. Third, related to immersion, is the idea of focus. There are a million skills in Jiu-Jitsu. And just as all the submission holds are ranked in terms of order of importance, so too are the skills themselves.
Not all of the skills of jiu-jitsu are as important as others. By focusing on a relatively small set of moves at the expense of less important moves, your progress rates go up through the roof. Jiu-jitsu is full of distractions, much like life itself. And if you get wound up in all the distractions, your progress starts to diminish very, very rapidly. Stay focused on the most important skills, even if it means excluding a whole bunch of much less important skills. Learning to exclude the unimportant in favor of the important is a massive part of your ability to sustain useful progress over time that'll make you more effective on the mat. So again, it comes down to make the right choices with your submissions. Don't go for low percentage moves that only work once or twice a year. Focus on the ones that work every single day in training, which work against every kind of opponent, the most high percentage ones. Get used to the idea of immersing yourself in the skills. Learn every aspect about them, how to combine them with others, every possible aspect of the skill. Focus on them. Don't get distracted. Don't focus on one thing one day and then another thing another day. Just focus on the most important elements once you've made that choice, even if it means excluding a whole bunch of other skills, which frankly aren't nearly as important. The fourth key element in increasing your submission rate in the least possible time is a mental element. This is the idea of identifying opportunity and pulling the trigger once opportunity is identified. It's a common thing that people will learn a lot of skills, but if you can't identify opportunity in the heat of sparring or competition, it's of no use to you. And of course, you have to be able to pull the trigger once you've identified opportunity. Remember always that an athlete who knows a skill but is unwilling to use it is no better off in competition than an athlete who simply doesn't have the skill. Your skills are only as useful as the confidence you exhibit in pulling the trigger when the opportunity arises. So you've got to be able to see opportunity and then pull the trigger. If you can work with these four elements, the idea of choice, making a wise choice as to which submissions you should pursue and study, going after the most high percentage ones, of the idea of focus, of looking at the various options you have and excluding unimportant options and focusing only on the most important, on the idea of immersion, of studying every aspect of these few choices that you've made, and working on the idea of identifying opportunity and pulling the trigger once it's identified. If you can excel in those four elements, you can be extremely successful, increasing your submission rate in a relatively short period of time. This video will be about how you're going to maximize your use of these four elements in the study of submission holds.
In your opinion, what's the most effective way to improve? Paying more attention to other people's sparring, maybe a specific way of drilling, training?
That's a great question. It's also a huge question. There's a lot to say about this. I'll try and break this down. Okay, first, our ideal in jiu-jitsu is progressive training. Okay, if you're getting to a situation where long periods of time are going by and you're questioning whether you're really getting any kind of better, you're getting better at all as time goes by, that's just never a good thing. There should be a sense in which when a year passes by, you should be noticeably better than you were at the start of that year. That should never be in doubt. The question is, okay, how are you going to do this and how are you going to maximize the rate of progression? It's one thing to make progress, but are you making the most possible progress? That, I think, is the real question you're asking here. I believe the first step is to have a clear understanding of where you stand now. If you don't have a clear idea of what your current level is, what you're currently good at, and what you're currently poor at, and what you need to get to the next level that you desire, it's hard to make any kind of progress. So your first step is always self-assessment. Can you give yourself an accurate self-assessment? And what is that self-assessment going to be based on? Well, it should be based upon how you perform relative to the peers that you have around you. Who are the people you train with? How are you performing with them? What are your most successful elements? What part of the game are you performing well upon them? What parts of the game are you performing poorly? So
always begin with the most accurate self-assessment you can give. I believe that the best way to gain self-assessment is through the use of video. Videotape yourself. We often have very inaccurate perceptions about ourselves. We tend to think that we're better than we really are in some ways, and we tend to underestimate ourselves in other ways. Video doesn't lie. Okay, film yourself going against other people and try to make assessments based on what you see in front of you. Listen to the opinions of some people who you trust, but also bear in mind that other people's opinions of you are often inaccurate too. So, as I said, video is generally a better way to study yourself than your own perceptions of yourself or other people's perceptions. They also provide a very accurate historical reference so that a year from now you can watch yourself rolling under or sparring under similar circumstances, and you can compare the videos and give it a pretty accurate assessment. Are you making progress or not? Once you have that clear sense of assessment, who am I, what am I good at, what am I not good at, what do I need to improve, then you've got to start building a program which is designed to improve your current strengths and radically improve your current weaknesses. The two kinds of progress you always want to be making are refinement of things you're already good at. Okay, you never want to be static at things you're already good at. You always want to refine them, get better. A good example of Hodger Gracie. Hodger was always very, very strong in cross-collar strangles. But between 2003 and 2008, he got radically better at them. He was already good, but he wasn't satisfied with that and kept getting better until by 2008, it was almost an unstoppable technique. The other thing is you've got to identify your weaknesses and do something about that. What I will say is that you guys in this generation of jiu-jitsu have something which my generation of jiu-jitsu had to a very limited degree, and previous generations didn't have it all. You live in an information age. Okay, this is a remarkable time in human history where we have greater access to information than any generation previous to us by a landslide. Okay, you can live in the North Pole, far from anywhere, and at any given moment, you can access information from the best world champions. You can go on Hodger Gracie's website and learn from the greatest jiu-jitsu athlete of his generation. You can be living in the North Pole and watch ADCC live and see the best athletes in the world competing against each other. Everyone has equal access to information. Once you gain that information, you can use that to build training programs. You don't have to be training with the best guys in the world. You just need access to the information and to train with your peers to make remarkable progress over time. Always remember that Hodger Gracie, when he moved to England, was training mostly with white belts and blue belts. And yet that was the time he made the most progress in his career because he had information. He figured things out. He used trial and error methods. He constantly worked with the students. It didn't matter that the students weren't particularly experienced. He was still making incredible progress, more than almost anyone at that time in the world. So I'm a big believer that once you make an accurate self-assessment of who you are, what you're good at, what you're not good at, the information is out there. Okay, then just build a training program based on refining your current strengths and working your way around your current weaknesses. I'm a big believer in positional sparring, so that if you have a current weakness with a certain kind of escape, put yourself in there. Volume of training is the key to success. You got to have knowledge, you got to know what you're doing, and you got to have a high volume of training, exercising that knowledge to turn it into a skill. By focusing on those current weaknesses, you can eventually turn them into strengths. So that we have situations that, as I said earlier in this video, jiu-jitsu was the overall performance of leg locks in jiu-jitsu 10 years ago was terrible. It was a disaster. And yet now it's one of the strongest aspects of the sport. You will be amazed at what time can do once you make a strong assessment of where you currently stand, an accurate self-diagnosis, usually best done through the use of video,
the acquisition of knowledge, and you have a greater ability to make use of that now than any other point in human history. You can go on Hodge's website. You can there's numerous websites out there. There's instructional videos. You can just watch match footage of the best athletes in the world. There's an incredible opportunity for anyone, regardless of location, to gain information. Then it's a question of taking that information and building it into physical skills. Okay, it's not enough just to have knowledge. You've got to be able to perform, and that will come from a training program, which I believe should be focused primarily around positional sparring and the drilling of moves until you feel. And initially, you have to drill moves with a lack of resistance, just to get a basic feeling for the technique. And then you have to progressively work against tougher and tougher opponents, applying it under sparring conditions. And if you can do this over time, you can make remarkable progress. There's an old saying that most people tend to greatly overestimate what they can do in terms of progress over a 6-month period, but greatly underestimate what they can do over a 5 to 10 year period. Okay, if you just have some patience and work in this disciplined manner, based on a clear assessment of where you stand now, the acquisition of knowledge, and the turning of that knowledge into physical skill through a specialized training program based largely around positional sparring and drilling, you'll be amazed at what you can do to transform yourself in 5 to 10 years.